Jim Matheson, a congressman from Utah, is in favor of law enforcement that keeps X-rated material out of kids' hands. The attorney, Lawrence Walters, who represents several online pornography sites, says the rules have nothing to do with protecting children. Mr. Walters, this sounds relatively simple. How is this not protecting children?
Well, you have to understand, these regulations go far beyond simply requiring that there's evidence that the performers are over the age of 18, which is fine. Everybody agrees with that. What they do is they require that each distributor maintain copies of the personal identification of the performers, causing all kinds of potential problems like identity theft and stalking and so forth. And they require that each distributor keep copies of these age records, sometimes numbering in the hundreds of different people distributing these images. So you're requiring duplication of documents over and over and over again, allowing more of a chance of this information to seep out into the wrong hands. There's all kinds of other minutiae that these regulations require far beyond.
How is that? I mean, how is that any different than a bank or an accountant or any other significant institution or moderate institution that keeps a record of its customers or its employees? I don't see how being asked to keep a record of who's worked there or who's worked in movies that your company has distributed is such an onerous request.
Yeah, well,
and I don't see how it's any more of a risk. How is it any more of a risk for identity theft than Best Buy or Bank of America or any other corporation with a long list of customers or employees?
Sure. Well, those privacy laws and obligations imposed upon those who take credit cards and the banking institutions and so forth. But here, anytime a DVD or a film is sold to another distributor or a webmaster, anybody who wants to buy some content on the internet and redistribute it, the law says you have to provide copies of these IDs, driver's licenses and passports and so forth. So all I've got to do to get my hands on a performer's personal information and driver's license number is to buy a DVD with a bunch of performers in it. And this is dangerous. You're not paying attention to the privacy rights and to the safety and security of those who perform in this constitutionally protected media.
All right, Representative, what do you say to that component of this? Do you feel that there's an element of this that could be edited or modified in some way to protect the privacy of the performers and at the same time accomplish what you're trying to get done here?
Look, I'm open to any suggestion that would be reasonable in terms of looking out for privacy rights, but let's make sure that we're doing the right thing here, and that is we want to make sure that underage performers aren't being pulled into this type of material. And I think that the Justice Department has come up with these regulations. It would be appropriate for Congress to take a look at this latest version of the regulations, and if there's some reasonable approach to add some privacy protections, I think people would be open to that.
How does that sound, Mr. Walter?
You know, that's great. That's the first time I've heard that concession since we've gone through this, and that's wonderful that the congressman is willing to work with the industry to try to resolve these concerns. The federal courts that have looked at this have so far enjoined the regulations as applied to webmasters. So there's obviously some constitutional problems out there, and we should all look at it and come to a reasonable solution that protects everybody's rights and concerns.
I mean, a television show is probably the last place that you should discuss how to legislate, but fair to say, Mr. Walters, that in the event you have received some version of reasonable privacy protection, that you would no longer object to laws demanding validation of being of age in order to perform in this business?
Well, I can tell you that nobody is against making sure that everybody's over 18, at least of all the adult industry. And the problem is that what they're trying to fix, making sure that everybody has a proper ID, won't necessarily cure the problem of somebody coming up with a fake ID. So there's other issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not a reason not to do it.
No, absolutely.
Congressman, how prevalent is the problem? In other words, what evidence do you have? How much underage participation is there in pornography today?
My concern is not so much about underage participation in the product. It's those who are viewing the product on the internet. I've actually introduced legislation that would mandate that pornographic websites have to use age verification software before anyone can access a pornographic site, because right now the largest segment of our population looking at internet pornography are children between the ages of 11 and 17. I think that's outrageous. And as a parent, I think we ought to have that verification software.
We had that conversation before on the show, and I don't want to get back into it right now, not because of its lack of import, but because we've done it before. We'll come back to it again. I thank both of you for your time on this subject this evening, Representative Matheson and Mr. Walter.